Why would President Trump target the Islamic regime in Iran? What do Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and tariffs have in common? And how might this reshape the world order? At first glance, these issues seem completely unrelated, but when you look closer, they may actually be part of a much larger strategy. Just a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a ruling declaring that the Trump administration's tariffs were illegal and must be removed as soon as possible. That decision raised an important question. What do tariffs have to do with geopolitical actions, including potential conflict with the Islamic Republic of Iran? The answer may be surprising. These are not isolated events. They can be seen as different tools serving a single, broader policy direction, a strategy that goes beyond economics and extends into global power dynamics. In fact, there is a growing argument that efforts to change the political systems of countries like Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba were not sudden or reactive decisions. Instead, they may have been part of a long-term vision that predates the 2024 election. Clues to this vision appear in several places. One of the most important is an article titled "Restructuring the Global Trade System," written by Stephen Moran, an economic advisor connected to the Trump administration. In this article, Moran lays out a bold idea. The global trade system should be redesigned to better serve American interests. He explains not only why this shift is necessary, but also how it could be achieved. But to understand the scale of this proposal, we first need to understand how the current system actually works. At its core, the global trade system is built on one fundamental concept: money. And this is where the story really begins. Before paper currency, before digital transactions, before central banks, there was gold. For centuries, gold served as the foundation of economic exchange. It was trusted, limited, and universally accepted. That now shapes global power and possibly global conflict. To understand today's global economy, we need to go back hundreds of years to a time when money was not paper, but gold. To understand today's global economy, we need to go back hundreds of years to a time when money was not paper, but gold. But here's where things get interesting. In the 16th and 17th centuries, modern banking began to take shape. People would deposit their gold with banks for safekeeping, and in return, they received interest. A simple piece of paper confirming how much gold they owned inside the bank. Something changed. At first, these receipts were just proof of ownership, but over time, something changed. Instead of carrying heavy gold around, the bank would give depositors a receipt, a simple piece of paper confirming how much gold they owned inside the bank. People realized they didn't need to go back to the bank to withdraw gold every time they wanted to buy something. Instead, they could simply hand over the receipt itself. The receipt became money. A buyer would pay using the receipt, and the seller could later take it to the bank and exchange it for gold. Gradually, these receipts became standardized, same size, same format, and eventually evolved into what we now call banknotes. And here's the key point. Every banknote had real value behind it. Every dollar represented a specific amount of gold stored in a vault. At any moment, you could walk into a bank, hand over your money, and receive gold in return. This system worked for a long time, until the world changed. However, the supply of gold didn't grow at the same pace. Gold didn't keep up. The supply of gold could not keep up with the rapid growth of production. And since money was tied directly to gold, this created a serious limitation. Think about it. If you don't have more gold, you can't create more money. And if you can't create more money, how do you support a rapidly growing economy? This mismatch led to repeated financial crises and recessions, so governments needed a solution. In 1913, the United States took a major step by establishing the Federal Reserve. The idea was simple but powerful. Introduce a system that could manage money more flexibly. Under this system, the Federal Reserve was allowed to issue more currency than the gold it physically held, up to a certain limit. This gave the economy breathing room and allowed for controlled expansion of the money supply. And that decision would eventually change the entire global financial system. But even this new system wasn't enough. And that decision would eventually change the entire global financial system. But even this new system wasn't enough. Factories were producing more than ever before. Global trade was expanding rapidly. The volume of goods increased dramatically. But once again, the system hit a wall. Even with the flexibility introduced in 1913, money supply could not keep up with the speed of economic expansion. The imbalance between production and money became too large. And then everything collapsed. Everything collapsed. In 1929, the world was hit by one of the worst economic disasters in history, the Great Depression. It started in the United States, but quickly spread across the entire world. Millions lost their jobs. Entire economies were paralyzed. And many historians argue that this same economic collapse helped create the conditions for the rise of figures like Adolf Hitler in Germany. This was no longer just an economic problem, it had become a global political crisis. Then came a turning point. Franklin D. Roosevelt took office and tried to fight the crisis with bold policies. Some worked, many didn't fully succeed, but the system itself remained unstable. And then history intervened again. World War II began. Suddenly, everything changed. The demand for weapons, equipment, and supplies skyrocketed. Production surged. Factories came back to life. The economic engine restarted. World War II began. Suddenly, everything changed. World War II began. Suddenly, everything changed. The demand for weapons, equipment, and supplies skyrocketed. Production surged. Factories came back to life. The economic engine restarted. America was sending weapons, machinery, and supplies overseas, and in return, it was receiving something extremely valuable, gold. By the end of the war, the United States controlled the majority of the world's gold reserves. Estimates range from over 60% to even around 70 to 75% of global gold holdings. That changed everything, because now no other country had enough gold to support its own currency system, so the world needed a new system. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries gathered in a small town in New Hampshire at what became known as the Bretton Woods Conference, and there they made a decision that would shape the modern world economy. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries gathered in a small town in New Hampshire at what became known as the Bretton Woods Conference, and there they made a decision that would shape the modern world economy. The United States made a simple but powerful proposal. We will keep the dollar backed by gold, and you will back your currencies with the dollar. And the world agreed. And the world agreed, reshaping the global financial system forever. Under this new system, the US dollar was tied to gold at a fixed rate, $35 per ounce. Other countries tied their currencies to the dollar. This is how the dollar became the center of the global financial system. And this system did more than just stabilize currencies. It reshaped the world. Countries began to specialize, producing what they were best at and trading for everything else. Global trade expanded rapidly. Economies became interconnected, and many believed that this new system would reduce the chances of future wars. But it also created something else, dependence on the US dollar. So now you understand something critical. How the dollar became the dominant currency in the world, and how economic power shifted toward the United States. But this is only half the story, because what happens when the demand for dollars becomes too large? What happens when the system itself starts to break again? And more importantly, how does all of this connect to modern conflicts, sanctions, tariffs, and countries like Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba? That's exactly what we'll uncover in the next episode.